You're listening to The Critical Thought, where we challenge our listeners to use critical thinking when examining the teachings of Jehovah's Witnesses.
I remember this book that I read. In fact, we used to actually send this book out as gifts to people. The author, her name was Susan Forward. She wrote a book that was called Emotional Blackmail. And I'm going to tell you, when you read the book, it really just sums up the life of a Jehovah's Witness. I mean, when I read it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is our life. We live the life of basically emotional blackmail. She described this concept. It's called living in the fog. And the fog stands for fear, obligation, and guilt. And that's really what it's like for Jehovah's Witnesses. Let me give you a perfect example. This is the best example I can think of. Fear. There are Jehovah's Witnesses, baptized, dedicated Jehovah's Witnesses, who are watching this video right now. And do you know what they're afraid of? Do you know what they're really afraid of? They're afraid of getting caught. Now, can you imagine that? We're talking about 35, 40, 50-year-old grown people, house note paying, rent paying, light bill paying, and yet they are afraid of getting caught watching this video. They pay for their own internet service, and yet they're afraid. Jehovah's Witnesses, many times, they'll come to sites like this. Now, the Watchtower, and it's funny, and it's really funny because as former Jehovah's Witnesses, we know what the rules are. So when a Jehovah's Witness decides to click on his browser and come to a site where there are former Jehovah's Witnesses discussing the organization, you know, he's trying to play, he's dumb, like, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to be on that site. And it's like, it's funny, it's laughable. It's like, dude, you're not supposed to even be here if you really believe what you say you believe. Now, let me give you an example. You could have a brother. He's a brother who's reaching out, but he comes on websites like this at night. Now, the Friends of the Kingdom Hall, they don't know that, but he's afraid he's going to get caught. Because if he's being considered as a ministerial servant, the brothers, they see this outward appearance, him coming to the Kingdom Hall, him out in field service, and then secretly at night in the privacy of his home, where is he at surfing on the internet? Now, when you tell this to non-Jehovah's Witnesses, they can't believe it. I mean, I've told this to non-Jehovah's, and they're like, you got to be kidding me. I say, yeah, that's right. Now, they'll say like, so this is not a nudie site or, you know, a porno site? Nope. This is just a site where people discussing different biblical topics, whether they agree with the Watchtower, whether they don't agree. That's all we're doing, basically. And he's like, they'll be like, and they can't even do that? Can't do that. And so these guys live in fear because if it came to the attention of his circuit overseer and the body of elders that this brother is surfing and talking and dialoguing with JT, if he was up for being a ministerial servant to hand out some pamphlets and hand out some books and count some time and do a little territory work, that's gone. They would snatch that from him. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is a type of fear that you always fear being caught. And so when you think about it, it's very unfortunate. This is one of their teachings, how to deal or how to interact or not interact with those who've left the organization. That is the most basic teaching in the Jehovah's Witness faith. We don't interact with people who've left publicly, but privately in their homes, in the privacy of their homes, they have no problem. I mean, if you look at the comment sections in many of these forums, it's obvious this guy's a Jehovah's Witness. What is he doing up here? But he lives in fear. This is the double life that a Jehovah's Witness has to live just to make it. Now, think about this. You have an individual, he wants to be a ministerial servant. He wants to be an elder. Now, when I first came on the internet years ago, there were actually elders, ministerial servants, pioneers, circuit overseers, district overseers, even Bethelites were in a lot of the different chat forums discussing. I used to tell people all the time, I said, y'all guys are getting an inside look at how the organization runs. I remember we had a dialogue going one time. It was between two elders who were in the organization, two elders who had left. And they were discussing a judicial case, how they're handled. And you could just tell by the people who were listening, they was chiming in back and forth, and they were just amazed. We didn't know that happened. We didn't know y'all did that. And the dialogue just went back and forth. Well, when the society came out and dropped the hammer, I mean, they dropped the hammer. A lot of the elders disappeared. Ministerial servants disappeared. Pioneers disappeared. These guys were afraid. They stopped. I can't do this. They're going to take my stripes. And so it kind of left the internet with what you would call the weak ones in the congregation. And these are diehard people because they figure I might not be doing nothing in the congregation, but I can go on the internet and I can represent the organization. And of course, at the end of the day, the organization don't want them representing them, not them anyway. And so witnesses, they live in this world of fear of always getting caught. So isn't it interesting how that a Jehovah's Witness who comes on the internet to defend the society, he is going to represent the society. I'm going to give the Jehovah's Witness viewpoint. And yet he is doing this out of complete fear that if he is caught, he's in trouble. So you have the Jehovah's Witness defender, then you have other Jehovah's Witnesses. You have Jehovah's Witnesses, and like myself, for example, you come onto the internet because you want to know. You want to know what is going on. Now, you know that you can't ask certain questions at the Kingdom Hall. Every Jehovah's Witness knows there's just some questions you can't ask. So a lot of witnesses, they'll go onto the internet. So if I can't ask the brothers at Kingdom Hall, I'll go onto the internet and see. And then they come onto these sites. They start reading. And then they start looking up certain articles. And they're like, well, that's true. They'll look up something else. Well, that's true too. And then they'll see things that relate to what they personally know. And they're like, that's true. I don't care what nobody say. That's true. You know, it might not make us look good, but it's true. And so many times these persons, they too operate on the fear. I recall myself when I first ordered Ray Franz's book. We had a brother in our congregation who worked at the post office. You know, I was very concerned. I suppose he see the book come in. You know, he see the book come in. He sees it's from Ray Franz, and it's going to be addressed to JT. Well, I'm going to be in trouble. And so as a witness, this is the type of environment that you constantly find yourself working under. Obligation and guilt. In Susan Forward's book, these were the other two components that make up the fog. The fear, obligation, and guilt. Obligation and guilt is very interesting how it takes place so many times in the congregation and in the lives of Jehovah's Witnesses. I mean, it's really amazing the way this takes place. Let me give you a few examples. Let's look at meetings, preparation for meetings. Preparation for meetings. Jehovah's Witness comes to the Kingdom Hall one day. There's no seats. He comes up, sits in the front right next to the Circuit OC and his wife. Circuit OC, his wife, looks over at his magazine. It's not underlined. What does this witness feel? Does this witness feel, man, I failed Jehovah? Nope. Nope. The witness is embarrassed. The witness feels guilty now. I didn't study my lesson. And the Circuit Overseer's wife sees it. Now, what happened to God? God didn't even come into the picture because this is the environment, the culture. As an elder, I would go on shepherding calls. And when you meet with the friends in their homes, especially people who had slowed down or stopped or whatever, you would find the same commonality. It was they had worn out. They just worn out. And it was as if they would say to you, they couldn't run fast enough, couldn't jump high enough. And the reason why is because the organization is a do more, do more, do more. You never will do enough. And as a result, it will simply just wear you out. And so what you end up with are people who fall under the obligation and guilt. The organization is very good at making Jehovah's Witnesses feel guilty. And they do it through their publications, through the circuit overseers, through the elders, through talks. And let me just give a couple examples. Take meeting attendance. What the society will do, they'll write these articles. These articles will be about somebody in Africa. Somebody who has, and the article will say, well, you know, they have to cross alligator-infested waters. And it's interesting because I remember on Monday night after the Watchtower study at Bethel, sometimes you will get invited over to different people's rooms after the Watchtower study. I remember being invited to this brother's room. He was a guy who worked down in the writing department. And it was like 3 or 4 of us. And we were just talking about, you know, how they put the articles together in the magazine and everything. And he was very cavalier about it. He said, you know, sometimes, you know, you'll see like maybe an article and it may have an experience in it. And he gave the example of like the ones you often see where somebody had to cross alligator-infested waters. And so then, of course, the point we brought around, you know, living in the West, you know, we have cars, we can drive. And so basically, you know, if you can't make it to the meeting and this brother or sister over there in Africa, you know, they got to cross alligator-infested waters, you know, why can't you come? And that's the basic message, okay? And so we're sitting there, you know, talking. He said, well, of course, you know, many times we don't tell everything about all the details because, you know, we're trying to make a point. And so we're like, well, what's some of the details? And he said, well, sometimes, for example, it may be they do have to cross alligator-infested waters, but everybody in town crosses the same alligator-infested waters. They've been crossing these alligator-infested waters all their life. Little kids, from the time they was old enough to walk, they had to cross alligator-infested waters. So it's not like they were really going out of their way. For them, it was really a part of life. In order to get to the other side, to get into town, this is how you had to do it. And so you grew up in an environment like that. It's not like you or I, who have never crossed alligator-infested waters, to go anywhere. But for a person who, well, we learn all the tricks, we know how to do it, we know what to look for. But of course, that will kind of take away the punchline from the article. So they'll just tell you just the part about the alligator-infested waters, not all the details surrounding it. And so friends who couldn't make it to the meeting, they're feeling like, oh man, I didn't make it to the meeting tonight, and Sister Johnson over there in Africa, she's swimming across the lake to get to the other side. And so these are little techniques that would be used that would just make people feel guilty. I know this brother, he ended up having to go and seek professional help. And it was interesting what the psychiatrist who was talking to him said. We had a conversation about this, and he was asking me why we had left, and I explained to him why we left and everything. And he was sharing with me his experience at the doctor's office. So the doctor said, well, let me just get some background on what your typical week is like. And this was during a time when we had all, the meetings were throughout the week. We had 2 midweek meetings and the weekend meeting. So what happened was, the doctor says, I want you to tell me what your day-to-day schedule is like. So he said, well, typically, Monday I get up and I go to work, and Monday night I come home and I prepare for my Tuesday night meeting. And then on Tuesday I go to work, come home Tuesday night, I go to my Tuesday night meeting. And then on Wednesday, go to work. Wednesday night I come home, I prepare for my Thursday night meeting. Thursday, I go to work, I come home, go to my Thursday night meeting. On Friday, I go to work. On Friday night, I normally try to prepare my little presentation because I'm a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm going to go out and knock on doors on Saturday. So Friday night, I'll spend some time getting my magazine together, getting my presentation together. On Saturday morning, I'll go out and knock on doors in the neighborhood. And then Saturday afternoon, I'll do my little running around. And then Saturday night, I'll do my watchtower lesson. And then on Sunday, I'll go to the Kingdom Hall. And then Sunday afternoon, I'll go out and field service. And after that, I might go out to dinner or something like that. And so the doctor says, so now, how often do you do this schedule? He said, I've been doing this schedule all my life. and so she said, well, when do you have time for any type of recreation or hobbies and things of this nature? And of course, he told, as Jehovah's Witnesses, we consider, time is limited. So we don't really get a chance to do a lot of these things, even though witnesses do. But generally, we try to focus most of our time on things related to our ministry. And so the doctor is sitting there thinking to herself, his entire life is involved in something that involves the watchtower. And so you have people who they end up struggling because they simply have no alternative in what they're doing. So even healthcare professionals, they too many times realize that the demands that are placed on Jehovah's Witnesses can lead to depression for many of them many times. Another example that was often used for many, many years of how they could guilt trip their friends. A lot of elders used it, a lot of circuit overseers used it. Society, that was one of their best articles probably for guilt tripping people, is the one that's known as the Sister with the Iron Lung. It was an article that the society wrote about a Jehovah's Witness who she was confined to a chamber in her home so she could breathe. So she was very limited. She couldn't get out of the house and everything. She only could witness when the postman came by or someone stopped by. And so a lot of circuit overseers, a lot of elders, they would use this because they would say, look, she is confined to her house, and yet she has time to turn in every month. Look at you. You're not confined to your house, and you have no time or very little time. Or meeting attendance. She is tied in to the Kingdom Hall by means of the phone line so she can get her meetings, and yet if she could get out of that tube, she would be here. Yet you can come to the Kingdom Hall and you're not here. And so over and over, you will get these types of articles. One of the best ones I've seen recently is the one with the summer conventions. The society has told all the friends basically, look, after the convention is over with, we need for you to keep your suit and tie on. And when you go out to the restaurants and so forth, you need to have on your badge and you need to still be dressed, right? So you can imagine you have a family, they decide, oh, we're going to go change clothes and get casual. We've been sitting in the convention for the last 6-7 hours. We're going to go home and we're going to relax. And they go out to dinner. Across the table, they have a couple who in their suit and tie with their little badge on. And you can see the kids like, Daddy, they still dressed. Now, it's going to make them feel like what? they're going to feel guilty because they didn't keep on their suit and tie and their badge. And so it's this constant culture and lifestyle of Jehovah's Witnesses that puts them in the fog. Fear, obligation, and guilt. And many times these things have absolutely nothing to do with serving God. And that's what really, critical thinkers is all about. We want people to stop and think critically about a lot of the things that we as Jehovah's Witnesses were told to do or looked upon harshly if we failed to do these things. And that really drives home the point. So many things that as Jehovah's Witnesses that caused them to literally live in the fog was never something that God wanted people to do.
This program was sponsored by Critical Thinkers.